Today I'm going to show you guys some really helpful tips if you like to use one-shots in your beats. If you use one-shots in your beats, there are a few things that you should keep in mind to make sure you make the best possible beat. Whether that be the functions that are available in FL Studio or the different techniques that you can use whenever you're making a beat using one-shots. First off, understanding the different stretch modes that are available in FL Studio is really important. By default, it's going to be set to resample, which might not be what you actually want. If it is set to resample, what's going to happen is that the length of the one shot is going to change depending on which note you play, and this can be really important if you're using your one shot to create some melodies or your chord progression. And you guys can hear the difference if I played a high pitched note here. The length of the one shot is far more different if I played a really low note. And as you guys can imagine, if we use this one shot to come up with a chord progression or a melody that spans over multiple octaves, this can be a problem. The different notes that you play are all going to take up a different length of time, and that's going to end up making your beat sound really messy. So going back in and changing the stretch mode to stretch is something that you might want to do. And now you guys can hear the difference if I go back into the piano roll. As you guys can hear, the different notes all last the same length, which is exactly what we want. The next tip that will help you get more use out of your one-shots is to play around with the envelope function. And this is just a very basic idea whenever you have a one-shot that you like, but it just lasts a little bit too long. So what you do is just go into the sample, head over to the envelope and instrument settings, turn on the envelope, bring the attack all the way down, turn the hold all the way up, and from here you can play around with the decay, sustain, and most importantly the release knob. You can completely change the shape of your one-shot at this point and actually use it as if it were a typical instrument or a preset from a plugin. And when you do this, a good idea is to go back into the sample settings here and comb through the different parts of the sample to see if you can get a different tone out of the different sections of your one-shot. And you can do this by just hitting normalize and then combing through the different sections of your one-shot using the sample start knob right here. As well, going back into the envelope settings and turning up the attack a tiny bit is something that I actually like to do in certain situations. Let's say, for example, I want to use my one shot to come up with my melody, but the sound as it is a little bit too intrusive and just fills up too much space in the beat. This will help take your one shot and not have it take up as much room in the beat, because essentially what we're doing is taking the loudest part of our one shot, which is probably the very beginning of it, the initial attack, and we're basically just reducing it. Next up, a very simple tip, as many of you already know. When you're using a one-shot, most likely it's going to be labeled what key it is. For example, here we have an A sharp. So to map it to our traditional keyboard, it's probably a good idea to go into the sample and making sure the right key is selected down here. But if you have a one-shot and it's unlabeled like the one that we have here, you can always use Wave Candy to figure out what the actual key of your one-shot is. So I'm going to play a C note on my keyboard. And it looks like this is actually a B. So I'm going to go in, right click B, and now this is going to be mapped to a traditional keyboard layout. And if you don't know how to use Wave Candy, hit the link above my head where I made a full tutorial video on how to use it. The next tip, this is something that I mentioned in a video that I made on melodies a little while back. If you come up with a melody, it can be really helpful to take your MIDI score and split it amongst multiple one-shots. And you would do this by duplicating your one-shot out, and this is going to allow you to have a lot more control over the different types of layers in your melody. For example, here I came up with some chords using one of the layers of my one-shot, and here I came up with a top line melody using my duplicated one-shot. And you might be thinking, what was the point in that? What are the differences between these two layers? Well, in my duplicated layer here, what I did was I played around with the attack time like I just showed you guys. And some of you guys might have picked up on what else I did to this one-shot. I went into the miscellaneous functions and I turned on portamento, so it sort of has a sliding sound to it now. Again, this is how it would have sounded without this on. But once I turn portamento on, we get that cool sliding effect. Also, you can experiment with what kinds of effects you want to add onto each layer as well. So for example, let's say I duplicate this out again. You guys can hear using the exact same one shot, I sort of created this shimmering sound in the very high end. And I did so by using some pretty experimental effects on this layer here. Again, using the exact same one shot. And again, I can do the exact same thing once more here. Here, I use the exact same one shot, but I just pitched it way lower than all of the other notes here. And I basically created this bass tone using that exact same one shot. So as you guys can see, playing around with your one-shots can yield some pretty unique results, so seeing how they sound at more extreme pitches might be a good idea whenever you use a one-shot. But that's not the only way you can take your one-shot and have it sound different than the original intention. You can always use resynthesis, which is a great and easy way to take your one-shot and try to create something new with it. And the way we would do this is just open up a synth that allows for resynthesis, so if you're using FL Studio, Harmor is a good option. So what you can do is just choose from one of the presets here, and then you can just drag your one shot into Harmor. And you guys can hear the result here. I should mention, if you're gonna do this technique and you wanna come up with a chord using this sound, make sure legato here is turned off. Otherwise, only one note's gonna be able to play at once. So there you go guys, those are some tips whenever you're using one-shots. Let me know in the comment section below if you have your own tips or tricks that you like to use whenever you're using one-shots. As always, like and subscribe. My free drum kit is available in the description box below, as well as the link to the Discord if you want your beats reviewed live. I do that every 2 weeks, and I will see you guys next time.